A very good morning to you, Marlin Saunders. How are you holding up this morning?
I'm very well, Brother Terry Martin. How are you?
I'm good. I'm behaving myself. I just need to check that you are behaving. So,
Thank you for that. We have to be
oh,
accountable.
wonderful. Absolutely, absolutely. Marlon, I know we had load shedding last week, so you weren't
Oh,
able to uh, be live.
if you
Has load shedding continued your side since then?
we don't really have load shedding because we're next to a hospital. The problem is we're having continuous power outages, and these power outages are not like those 15-minute ones. They're more like 15-hour ones.
Oh, no, that's not funny, man.
And
Whoa.
eventually, whatever batteries and whatever you have stored, they deplete, and then you
So,
just like you're in the mud.
okay, but I'm glad you're not in the mud this morning. You're out of the mud. So let's continue our discussion. We are talking about the importance of dialogue,
Yes,
especially and the role it plays in discipling, in coaching, in mentoring. And in our last discussion, we talked about the importance of facilitators or for facilitators having the skill to elicit information and sometimes
yes,
elicit information from people without them even knowing it. It's not a wrong thing to do. It's just to get people to talk. It's a
amen.
very FBI, CIA kind of skill to have. So if you have it, you could join the FBI or CIA. Um, but I think it's a wonderful skill to have as a facilitator, as one who is mentoring others uh, who are followers of the way. So let's this morning dive into how we continue to get them to talk, where they need talking, and how they need to be. I think you were the one who constantly the need for, people must be dialoguing to dialogue around the scriptures. And, about politics, about business news, about the tariffs that are going to click in on the 1st of August. I mean, there's so much. Yeah, but when it comes to dialoguing around what's really, people steer away. I want us to pick up on that one. Why do you think people aren't willing to talk about what's really real? Uh, where the rubber meets the road. What do you think some of the fears are that prevent people from doing that?
I think people are at the heart of it. They are afraid. They're afraid of what people may say about them. They're afraid to be perceived as weak. They're afraid to show actually their true frailties and some of their needs that they may have, the areas in their life where they're struggling. So people put up this facade, they put up this persona, they have this image that nie alles is reg, I am
Mm.
fine. You know, when you ask somebody, how are you? Inevitably, they're going to say, I'm fine. Whether, whether they just had a tragedy, you know, somebody just passed on, you phone your friend and say, hey, how are you? His wife just died. Say, no, I'm fine. But we know he's not fine because as you speak to him, he'll begin to cry and he'll speak. So I think fear is at the heart of why there's so little dialogue that takes place because we don't want to be seen as weak in any way.
Mm. And I'm wondering if we couldn't use people's fear in a more proactive way. If fear is what's driving me, then I'm not going to talk, right? Or I'm going to share selectively, or I'm just going to shut down. But if I put my fear in front of me and have my fear draw me, now watch my analogy. If my fear can draw me, the fear is going to draw me out to say something and say something real. So rather than have your fear drive you, have your fear draw you. I think it's an interesting take. It's not just semantic, right? But if your fear is that which is drawing you, you may sense a greater impulsion, a greater need to talk. I can
Yeah.
talk to Marlon because Marlon now twice has asked me, Terry, how are you doing? Well, by the second time Marlon asked me that question, I'm going to say, I'm just not doing well.
Yes.
Right. So maybe there's just a different take. Have the fear, put the fear in front of you, and have your fear draw you versus drive you. Because when it drives, it tends to gets me to shut down. But if it draws me out, I'm either going to shout or scream, or I'm going to do something that's a little different than when fear drives versus fear draws. Right.
That's true. And for the facilitator, the drawing process is the key. And the means to draw is often through questions. I'll give you an example. Last week we got together. It was a church gathering, and to answer also partly the question, why do people not get together to talk? Because one thing people love to do, especially South Africans, to eat together. So we had a meal, as a simple meal, just had some soup and bread, and people came and they were talking about all sorts of nonsense, the standard Manchester United, Arsenal garbage. After a while, I said, we got together tonight to talk about the importance of fatherhood. And I told him a story about how the situation amongst our communities where there's so little fathers and issues that are happening with men. All of a sudden, the guys in the group began to speak of their experiences with their fathers. So the shift happened when we could have spoken the whole night about Arsenal's transfer window and how they failed. But there has to be a drawing. And the drawing came about where I asked a question, I painted a scenario, and I spoke about a personal experience that I had in my life. Non-threatening. I'm not saying, hey, brother, tell me now about how was your dad in your relationship? Not in that way. The subtle question, the subtle introduction. And for the next 2 hours, all the guys spoke about their own experiences with their dads. And eventually, what came out of that was one of the guys spoke about his father, in his need to forgive his dad. And then 2 days later, he sent me a message to say, this was the text I sent to my dad asking him to forgive me. So it's happening when we draw them out through subtle questions, through telling personal experience. That's the drawing. And then they take over from there. I couldn't get 2 words in after that.
Now look at that, because they could identify with the story that you were telling, right? Uh, if, if you've ever listened to any of my stuff early in the early morning sessions, then I talk through the scriptures as an unfolding story, because
That is it.
stories have a way of drawing people into it. So when you
Yes.
tell a story, you're drawing them into your story, your personal experience that you had in terms of your encounter, and all of a sudden they have an affinity and they start
Yes.
talking. Now let's talk about a little more difficult situation where you said afterwards you couldn't get a word in edgewise. What about the situation though where people just are dead scared to talk? You're trying and they're not talking. Have you ever been in
You
a
know,
situation like that? What would you suggest?
the secret there is to begin with simplistic truth, simple things. Oftentimes we want to talk to people on such a level that they almost feel intimidated by it. And it's like talking to a child. You speak to a child of simplistic things. And when you talk to them of simple things, things that have to do with truth that they know and that you know. In other words, you are going to engage with them. You're going to meet together on simple things where they can agree with you on elementary truth. As a result of that, you can lead them then from the simple, as Howard Hendricks said, from one to the next, from simplistic truth to more complex truth, from one truth to the next truth, from the known to the unknown. And I think that that's very challenging. It's difficult. And can I say, not everybody is going to engage. It's not necessary always to get everybody to engage at the same level. Although it's wonderful if everybody can contribute. And those who are quiet, you ask them to say something and speak to them, because people naturally, some of them are quiet, some are more louder, they speak. But to get everybody to engage is sometimes important. But if you can, the ones who are quiet, engage them on the simple things. And it's my belief that everybody has got something to say. It's just sometimes they're not asked. As a result, they're quiet. So engage on the simple things, and that will draw them themselves will draw them out. And then engage on more, what do you call it, advanced things, or
Yeah,
something that where you.
substantive things. Yeah, yeah. I like what you're saying. People have something to say because they are
Oh,
thinking things. They're just not telling you what they're thinking because they think when they come into this hallowed hour, they must have a certain tone, they must have a certain composure. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. I mean, I've twice in a row listened to a fellow now who's teaching the scriptures, and whenever I listening, he switches into a very different tone. I'm saying, why are you doing that? Now, you and I, we probably the more excitable types. When we get excited, the decibels of our voices go up, and but it's quite natural, right? But this tone that's like is from outer space, man. You know, and people have that idea that when you're in a Bible study, you must say all the right things, you must ask all the right questions, you know, and you must have a seriousness of a celestial Buddha. You
yeah,
saw, I don't know if you saw these Jade East perfume bottles. They're in the shape of
yes,
a Buddha, and the
yes,
Buddha's got, and sitting there
hands.
very serious. Now, I always joke, I said, some of us have the seriousness of a celestial Buddha. Who could laugh their heads off. But really, and a lot has to do with how you make them feel. Do you see them? Do you see
Yeah,
them?
and all you gotta ask the person who's maybe not saying much. Do you agree with that, Sister Lily, or Brother John? Do you agree with what we are saying? And give them an opportunity to say something, because I can guarantee you, not everybody who's sitting in the pews on a Sunday morning agrees with what the pastor is saying. Not
Well,
because you are
maybe
quietly.
nobody's agreeing. Maybe nobody's agreeing on any given morning.
Exactly.
I love to work from that premise because anyway, yeah.
And how wonderful if you have the privilege of disagreeing with the pastor, where you will have the freedom to say, Pastor, I don't agree with what you say, or I have a different opinion, or I see it like that. And that's where real dialogue is taking place, because then we're getting everybody's opinion coming in. And then with that, those perhaps who have a different way of thinking, it's not about now bashing that guy and knocking him down, because anybody can use a blunt instrument. But to be able to use wisdom and thought to ask them questions whereby you can draw them to think a little bit about what you are thinking and how you see it by questions. And that, I think, is the key for facilitation, and why people will always want to come and engage, where we ask them questions. We don't just say, you better believe this is how it is, and if you don't believe it, does it here.
Mm, mm, mm.
And that's the key, I think, to getting the place where people will all be able to speak. Do you
Well,
agree?
I love what you're saying, and I think I would love us to do another block like this, and then
Yes.
to talk about how, in a group dialogue, do you embark on the impossible conversations. I'm not just
Hey.
talking about the hard ones, the impossible ones. Because we all have ways and means of killing a conversation that we're uncomfortable with.
Yes.
Just sit down, shut your mouth, give you a dirty look. Or as you said, you just walk away. I would love for us to pursue that. And um, for our next dialogue, how do you as a dad, how do you as a teacher, how do you as a preacher, how do you as a mother, a father engage, get to know the skills, what the skills are to engage in impossible conversations. Now, by impossible doesn't mean it's impossible. It's just
Yes.
something between a husband and wife, for example. I want us to pick up on that and to pick your brain a bit on that, because you're going to get the guy in the group that is not going to open his beak because
Yeah.
the topic on the table is too hard to handle. How do we
Mm.
navigate around that? So I want to whet our listeners, I want to whet the appetites for our next one next Thursday. How to have
Wonderful.
impossible conversations.
I
Pastor
love it.
Marlon, thanks for
Thank
your
you.
time and your
Thank you.
insights. Next time, next Thursday, load shedding permitting or energy permitting, same time, same place. Thanks for your
Lovely.
time.
Thank you so
Listeners,
much, Brother.
you're
God
welcome.
bless.
Have a good day and
You
God
too.
bless you. Sure.
God bless all the listeners. Thank you. Bye.
Right. Bye
Bye.
bye.